Now, it's been a quiet start to the transfer window for Liverpool so far, but we finally had some big breaking news around a potential incoming today. That is, of course, the England winger Anthony Gordon, and the news that there had been some talks between Liverpool and Newcastle around a potential move. Now, of course, you may have read what I've written about this today. I would always urge you to take a look at what I write around these things. I'm not always as quick in terms of getting the videos out on YouTube, so if you want to follow me on Twitter, or X as it's called now, on Facebook or Threads, I'm at David Lynch LFC on all of those, and you will see that's my handle as well on YouTube these days. So trying to keep it across the board that you can make it easy to follow my work. So I would urge you to go and seek out that story that I wrote for This Is Anfield about this, but I do also want to, in this video, go a little bit more in depth into that breaking news and sort of get into what we actually know at this point. Now, I think the best place to start really is where this news came from and where the initial breaking news came from, and that was the Daily Mail story written by Craig Hope, where he'd said that talks had been ongoing between Liverpool and Newcastle but had kind of fallen apart, had collapsed. And he also mentioned that Quansah was a potential, Jarell Quansah was a potential mate weight in that deal that was mentioned at that point. And also said that obviously Newcastle were looking to make deals because of the pressure that was on them, because of the Premier League profit and sustainability rules, that deadline being June 30th. So Gordon was one of the players talked about, a real saleable asset. So of course, I followed that up and checked with my sources at Liverpool. And so now I want to go into what I really understand about this and what I know about this story. And to this point, you know, I absolutely can confirm that there had been talks between Liverpool and Newcastle, and that was based on, or came about because of a Newcastle approach to Liverpool. I mentioned there about the pressure they're under with PSR, and they need to make sales around that to make things right, to ensure that they don't get dock points or get a fine from the Premier League. So Newcastle made the approach to Liverpool there, you know, as I know they have done with other players as well. It's not just Anthony Gordon. Obviously, we know that Alexander Isak as well has been offered to Chelsea. So, you know, Newcastle knew that they needed to make a big sale. So that is a big part of why these talks came about. Now, from Liverpool's perspective, the way it was put to me from sources, senior Anfield sources, was that the proposal that came to them was not quite right, didn't really suit, and that is why talks had kind of fallen apart really at that moment. Now, there's a few reasons why those talks haven't really progressed and why we've not seen any movement on it beyond those talks falling apart. And I want to start by saying, you know, Liverpool absolutely admire the player. The long-term admirers of Gordon really like him, and you can understand why. I mean, goals, assists, work rate. He's a local lad as well, so there's a lot to really like about him. But they didn't progress to making an offer to Newcastle, and as I say, a few reasons behind that. One of those, of course, I mentioned Jarell Quansah there. Now, you know, I understand that Newcastle want a centre-back this summer. That's absolutely an area they're looking to strengthen, but for Liverpool, absolutely no chance that they would countenance getting rid of Jarell Quansah or using him as a make-weight in any deal like this, and that is completely understandable. I mean, he is one of the best young centre-backs in the country, maybe one of the best young centre-backs in Europe, given the way he broke through at Liverpool last season. He even pushed Ibrahima Konate, didn't he, out of the team in the latter part of the season. An unbelievable talent who's got a big future, not just for Liverpool, but also England. So the idea that to bring someone in like Gordon, you'd be getting rid of a quality player like Jarell Quansah, particularly when defence is an area we know Liverpool maybe even want to make stronger, that wouldn't have made sense for them really, and I totally understand why they wouldn't want any involvement in a deal that involved Jarell Quansah. And also, another reason they said that you know, this deal didn't make sense for them is that they've got an awful lot of strength in depth on that left wing at the moment, haven't they? And again, that's something I can completely understand, that argument. I mean, you look, Diaz is obviously has been a starter there for a while, and I know there's some question marks around his output, but I think he's still a top class player, isn't he? Jota can play on that wing, absolutely. We've seen that a few times. He's a bit more of a goal scorer there than an out-and-out sort of winger that carries the ball up the pitch. But again, a flexible player who can absolutely play on the left wing. And also, Cody Gakpo, there's a huge argument that, you know, he's putting himself in a position where he could even be Liverpool's starting winger next season. I mean, you see him playing there for the Netherlands at the moment in Euro 2024, and I just think he looks absolutely electric. He looks more natural. It looks like a position that fits him better than that centre-forward role that he's been in occasionally. So, you know, again, I would argue, you know, he could be in contention to start next season there. So there's a lot of strength in depth on that left wing. And yes, I imagine, you know, Diaz can play on the right-hand side sometimes. I guess Gordon probably can as well. But he's definitely much more of a natural on the left wing. So it's an area Liverpool have got real strength there. So again, that was another reason it was put to me that the deal, you know, as it was structured, as it stood, didn't really make sense for Liverpool in that moment. Now, obviously that's what we do know now. You know, that's why we know that the talks fell apart. There wasn't any movement on that front. But I think the big question, and what people have been tweeting me to ask, or asking me on various social media platforms, is what happens next, really. And I think the one thing I would say around transfers, I'm always really wary, is that things change really quickly. I mean, I could get to the end of filming this video and something could have broken out there, and as I say, things really do change. But I will give my opinion really on how I see the situation. It's very much my opinion rather than sort of understanding. It's based on what I do understand, but I think, you know, it is a little bit of my opinion in there. And the thing I would say that, you know, makes me sceptical that this will be reignited, or it's anything that will progress from this point. I think the first thing is, for starters, I completely agree with Liverpool. They do have that unbelievable strength and depth at left wing, and I you know, keep hearing, yeah, well, you know, Diaz might be off. Okay, that's a fair argument. Maybe that Barcelona do firm up their interest, and Liverpool think, look, he's 27, he's probably going to go past his peak soonish, and maybe we could get a winger with a little bit more output in terms of goals and assists. But look, a lot's got to happen for that. You know, Barca have got to stump up the money. We know they always have problems with money. Maybe they have to sell players to make that happen. That just drags this later into the window. So not anything that Liverpool could absolutely rely on that was going to happen. So you can't make business decisions or transfers based on the possibility of one of your starting players leaving. Because if you don't leave, then you've got a real problem in terms of your layout of your squad. You've got way too many players who want to play on the left-hand side. You've got a completely unbalanced squad then. And that's not something that Liverpool will want. So, you know, you can make that argument about Diaz going, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. And if it doesn't happen at this point, then that's a bit of an issue for Liverpool, particularly because if Newcastle are going to make this sale of Anthony Gordon, the huge reason why they would want to do it, and the reason they're pushing almost the players to Liverpool, is because, look, the deadline for PSR is June 30th. So, you know, time was really, really ticking for them on that one. Now, like I say, maybe Liverpool do open a left wing spot and Anthony Gordon looks like the absolute perfect replacement for Diaz. But the big problem is then we may be past the PSR deadline and Newcastle will say, well, look, the price has gone up massively. You know, this is going to be an expensive deal. They need to make those deals now. That's the appeal to them. The idea of them in a couple of months' time saying, okay, we want to sell the player to Liverpool because they've now got a gap on their left-hand side, a competitor, it wouldn't make sense to them really, because they already would be locked in financially in terms of a potential points deduction anyway. So, you know, I think this is a deal that had to be done in this short period of time. And otherwise, like I say, I'm a little bit sceptical about whether it will get done or not, because that deadline is so close now. And another thing that I think adds a bit more scepticism to it is the fact that Yankuba Minteh, the winger that we know Newcastle have been trying to sell for a while as well, who have been on loan in the Dutch league. We're hearing reports, I've seen David Ornstein report that a £33 million deal with Brighton has now been agreed. Now obviously that is a massive help to Newcastle in terms of the PSR position, that deal has been agreed. I suppose that the big question from this point is that enough to cover them off in PSR? We don't know how big that hole is that they have to fill. Maybe they still have to make the Gordon deal, and that really panics them into pushing a low fee out there that Liverpool just feel they can't turn down. But I'm not sure that the hole will be that big that it makes them that panicked, and maybe they would get a big sale elsewhere anyway. So that Minteh deal has really taken a lot of pressure off Newcastle, probably makes them less desperate around Gordon, and I think that's a little bit of blow to Liverpool in terms of, you know, maybe they do sell Diaz to Barca later down the line. And then they've got this where they want Anthony Gordon, but it's a more difficult deal to do with Newcastle then. But it's a real interesting one in terms of how that's going to work out. Like I say, we don't know what the club Newcastle's PSR position is, even with this Minteh money involved. So it's a really interesting one and a slightly difficult one to predict. But as I say, I think that definitely will ease things for Newcastle, and it just makes me a little bit, as I say, sceptical is the best word really, about whether Liverpool will be able to sort of reignite this deal. But I think, you know, on the positive side of things, I think we know that Liverpool like Gordon. I think he's a fabulous player and would be a really good fit for them. He's got all the qualities needed to play in an intense team like that, and I think he would be a really good player for Liverpool. I think it's quite clear that he's a Liverpool fan. I think from his interview since he's left since he's left Everton. He's been clearly dropping in a lot of hints and praise of Liverpool's atmosphere at Anfield, and been talking about Steven Gerrard an awful lot, which he never really did at Everton. And I remember interviewing myself actually for the Sunday Mirror back when I worked there, when he was just coming through at Everton, and very much didn't touch on the idea that he was a Liverpool fan in that interview, that's for sure, when he was playing for Everton. So no surprise to see he's actually finally admitting to that now, and I think, you know, again, things like that do make moves more likely further down the line. If he really wants to get to Liverpool, that is something that, you know, is worth bearing in mind, that he obviously clearly wants that. And as I say, in terms of the vacancy that might open up with Diaz potentially moving on in this window, of course, a lot has to happen. I think people presume that is just going to happen. You know, Barca have to get the money together. The money has to be right. The bid has to be right. And it all has to work for Liverpool as much as anything else. So not a guarantee. But if that vacancy opens up, then potentially is an interesting situation around when does Gordon's contract run to. Are Newcastle in a situation where they feel like he might not renew? Is it a situation where they feel they have to make the sale regardless of PSR concerns? I think that makes it maybe one to keep an eye on going forward. But as I say, certainly not one that I feel that's going to happen in the next week or so. You know, maybe I'm just putting my neck on the line at the moment, just saying that's my opinion. As I say, things do massively change, and Gordon would want the move, absolutely no doubt, as a Liverpool fan from what we can see. You know, Liverpool like him, so a lot of the ingredients are there, but it's whether that ingredient of Newcastle being willing to make the sale and the price being right. We just don't know how that's going to play out once we get maybe past the PSR deadline, but very much one to keep an eye out. And at least it's some exciting news, something to talk about. We know Liverpool are in the market, they're assessing options, and they are opportunistic at times. So something like this can pop up from absolutely nowhere, and they might make the move, and maybe that will be Gordon further down the line, and the money will be right for them. The deal will be there to be done. We will have to see. As I always say, the best way to keep track of that is to like and subscribe to the channel, of course, is to follow me on X, to follow me on Facebook, to follow me on Threads as well, at David Lynch LFC. That is where you will find the news first, and then I will always do a deeper dive on YouTube as well, so always worth following me on those platforms. And then, of course, you will find the deeper background news here on YouTube. And as I say, hopefully more interesting links to come, more news to come, more activity from Liverpool in the transfer market, because it has been quiet so far. But really hoping this is the period where it really starts to ramp up. And if that is the case, then hopefully more transfer updates to come. And hopefully I'll see you guys very, very soon.